Oh, here we go. Episode number 55. A new topic for the podcast. Today's episode is completely devoted to BJJ, Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, which is a new pursuit / endeavor / obsession that I've recently started. I actually don't even remember what day I started. Maybe 2 months ago, tops. But we'll get into that in a minute. Because first, we got to get the business out of the way. What is the business? The business is the companies that support this podcast. So this podcast is brought to you by Onnit. Onnit.com/hot. If you put that in there, it's going to put you to a landing page from Onnit.com. And you're going to get 10% off anything you buy when you go through checkout. So what is Onnit? It's a health and fitness organization company. It delivers total human optimization to its vast customer base, athletes, thinkers, fitness gurus, and entrepreneurs. They have a diverse range of products. Energy bars, protein shakes, creatine, and the like. And their flagship product is Alpha Brain. Now, speaking of this, I have a recommendation. If you're looking at trying some of their products and you want to get in at a price point that's a little bit lower, here's what I recommend. Because I just had a few of these, and the experience that I had after taking it was pretty interesting. So if you go to onnit.com/hot, across the top bar, you're going to see supplements, foods, fitness, apparel, sale, and more. Hover your mouse over the foods, and under fats and oils, you're going to see emulsified MCT oil. If you click on that, what I recommend, and I say that because it's the only flavor that I've tried, I would get the creamy vanilla MCT oil non-dairy creamer. Now, what you want to do, you don't want to just have that alone, or I guess you could inside of your coffee. But what I would recommend that you do is pair that with the Alpha Brain Instant, which is under the supplements tab. Click on Alpha Brain Instant, and it's basically a little tear open pouch. It's powder. And my good friend John Dudley actually gave me one of these at his house. And he poured a glass of water, put the Alpha Brain into it, which is the normal way that you take Alpha Brain, and then he added some of the creamer, the vanilla creamer, and we had it right before bed. I'm used to having Alpha Brain in the morning, and I take it on days where I really want to be firing between my ears. And I didn't know what was going to happen by taking it at night, but what did happen, and has happened every time I've done this, is that I have the most lucid dreams that I can remember having, and I sleep incredibly well. And I don't know if Alpha Brain is designed necessarily to enhance sleep, but for whatever reason, one, the combination of those two things, that emulsified MCT oil and the Alpha Brain Instant, is absolutely delicious. So if you're looking for trying some of their products, there's two right there off the bat that I recommend, and I use them as often as possible. Try it at nighttime. Try the Alpha Brain in the morning. I definitely feel the effects of that throughout the day when I take it in the morning, but at the same time, try that at night and stand by for seriously some of the most lucid dreams that you're ever going to have. Head over to onnit.com/hot. At checkout, you're going to get 10% off all the foods and supplements. And it's a good way to support the podcast. I don't get a dime if you guys spend money there. The deal I have with them is not based off of what people buy. So they're a great supporter of the podcast. And again, I'm going to throw this disclaimer out there. I try to do it every time I talk about supplements. Supplementation, in my mind, is the micro level. Focus on your macro. Get your rest and recovery in, get your training in, get your diet dialed in, and then start looking at the micro. Because if you throw pizza into a race car, it's not going to drive very good. So get everything else dialed in first, then focus on the micro. Onnit.com/hot. This episode is also brought to you by Free Range American. Now, I've had quite a few people reach out to me about what Free Range American is, and so I'm just going to give it a brief description again. In its essence, it is a brand that celebrates the freedoms we have in the United States. If you do not exercise and use the freedoms that we are very fortunate to have, in my opinion, they don't have any value. So it's a brand designed around celebrating people getting out there and executing on our mission statement, which is very simple. Do awesome shit. That is literally the purpose of the company. I don't know if it's a apparel brand. I don't know. I'm just going to say it's a brand, and it is designed to hopefully motivate people to get off the couch, because I don't know how many people are like me, but sometimes I need a little bit of a push to get off the couch. So hopefully it helps people in their pursuit of waking up tomorrow morning and being 1% better than you were today. So check it out, freerangeamerican.us. Now let's dig into my guests. The two gentlemen that I was very fortunate to snag some time from come from a world that I am very, very new to. In the last 18 months, I have started or gone down the path on two endeavors that I instantly found to be extremely difficult, humbling, and challenging. The first one is archery, and specifically bow hunting. And if you listen to the podcast, you've heard me whine and bitch and complain probably more than enough about archery and my own personal struggles with it. The second route that I went down very recently was, after multiple recommendations from a good friend, I went into the Straight Blast gym here in Kalispell, Montana, and I signed up to start learning Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. And I have always found it interesting. It's such a cliche comment that people will make sometimes, because I think they don't know what to say or what to ask when they find out about my military background. But I have heard many, many times, "Oh, SEALs, you guys can kill people with your pinky," right? And after I'm done hysterically laughing, I try to tell everybody, like, no, that's completely not the case. And the reality is the amount of stuff that I was taught to do with my hands in the military was extremely limited. And if it got to that point, that was a worst case scenario, because I had a primary weapon, a secondary weapon. Hell, sometimes I had a tertiary weapon. I would have to get through all three of those things, or something would have to go pretty wrong for me to end up putting my hands on somebody. So I actually avoided it for 40 years of my life, I guess it would be, since I turned 41 here not too long. But it was always something that I was interested in. So I went in and I started. And the owner of Straight Blast Gym, in addition to many things, but he owns the Whitefish location, the Missoula location, and the Kalispell location, is Travis Davison. He also has a role inside of the Straight Blast organization in general. He describes that in the podcast, so I'll let him do that. But that was my introduction to him. And a good friend of his is named John Frankl. Now, John and I, it's amazing to me how small the world is. Spent time in my hometown during different time periods, know some of the same people, the same areas, touch points with different organizations outside of Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. And then I moved to a place where one of his really good friends owns the gym that I end up walking into. So, it's not 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon, it's 1 degree of Kevin Bacon sometimes. John was here in Kalispell teaching a 2-day seminar, and I was fortunate enough to go to both days of the seminar and listen to him teach and participate in it. And one of my favorite things has always been learning from people who are a master of their craft. And John is exactly that, as is Travis. So at the end of the seminar, before they were rolling down to Vegas to continue their own journey in the sport, I grabbed a little bit of time with them. So we spent 90 minutes. I spent 90 minutes asking questions that I have about BJJ, because I don't know that much about it. And I have 1 millimeter of my pinky toe into the pool, and it's been awesome so far. And I love it. Why? Because just like bow hunting, I absolutely suck at it. It's a journey that I don't know if it will ever end, and it's really challenging. And those are the things for me that keep drawing me back. So, without getting too crazy, or me saying too much more about what we talked about, Cleared Hot, episode 55, with Travis Davison and John Frankl. Enjoy.
Okay, got the red smoke. Gun run, north and south, west of the smoke, west of the smoke. Okay, copy, west of the smoke. I'm looking at danger close now. Come on with it, baby, give it to me, I need it. Get cleared hot. Copy, cleared hot.
I love this medium because you can just talk. But the long form is so much better than sitting there and trying to express a complicated thought process in 30 seconds, right, which is what most media is. And I have questions. And from what I can tell so far, having been doing jiu-jitsu now for at least a week, that it's not simple. It's the opposite of simple. It's complex. and we were having a dinner conversation last night, and I thought, because it's called BJJ, that the origin was from Brazil. I did not know that it went further back from that. So given the two of you, and between the two of you, how much jiu-jitsu experience is there?
25, 20.
Okay, so damn near 5 decades. I think between the two of you, I think the best start is, because I know that most listeners to my podcast, I have yet to actually devote an episode to jiu-jitsu. I've actually been very quiet about getting started because people are like, hey, bring your gi. I'm like, no, I don't want to. Can I just tap now over social media? Like, you win. Like, you're better than me. You're very good looking. I'm not very attractive. You're very smart. I'm very dumb. Like, let's just end that there. But the knowledge of where it comes from, it was fascinating to me. So I will let you guys do it together. Or John, you can do it, or Travis, you can do it. But just the origins of what we were practicing at this seminar, where that actually came from. Because like I said, I thought of it as only from Brazil, but then I came to find out that it was much, much further than that.
Right. Can I start? Have at it. Okay, so jiu-jitsu is a traditional Japanese martial art, and what we do is more closely related to judo, which was one man, Kano Ichigoro's synthesis of various traditional jiu-jitsu styles and a little bit of Western wrestling. He was actually a physical education major, Western physical education major, and was interested in sort of rationalizing these esoteric traditional arts and making them more like boxing and wrestling in a sense. He originally called it Kano-ryu Jiu-Jitsu, which is his style of jiu-jitsu, and then later changed it to judo. And the big division between the Jitsu and the Do is Jitsu is like a traditional martial art. Do is a more modern or early modern spiritual adaptation. It's still for fighting, but the Do has this sense of a spiritual path as well. Mm-hmm. But in the midst of all that, one of his representatives wound up touring America. That's North and South America, and eventually wound up in Brazil. Maeda, Mitsuo Maeda, and the shortened version is he got in touch with the Gracie family.
Accidentally, or was it just
no?
A chance?
Actually, the founders of Gracie Jiu-Jitsu or Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu's father was involved in politics, and I think he helped Maeda secure a visa or otherwise be in Brazil. And he was either too old or too uninterested to learn jiu-jitsu, but he asked that his children could learn jiu-jitsu. Now, this is the Gracie version of it. There are alternate stories, but this is sort of the primary narrative. Some people contest. Anyway,
some people contest that the world is flat.
Correct.
So
yeah, I think I've heard that on podcasts
That's
too.
what I'm saying. It doesn't matter that
right.
like gravity doesn't exist. Okay, go drop an object and let me know how it works.
Right. On your, heavy and on your foot, preferably. Right.
Yep.
So it was taught to Carlos Gracie Sr., who was the eldest son, and Elio, who was, I think, the youngest, and if not the youngest, the smallest and frailest, was watching all the time, but not really cleared to do it. He had fainting spells, and the doctor didn't want him doing it.
What time frame was this?
Early 20th century.
Okay.
Yeah. And Kano wouldn't have even been doing what he was doing in Japan until very late 19th century.
Okay.
So a little over 100 years ago. And at that point, the name judo wasn't completely finalized yet. And so whether in opposition to this more sportification and spiritualization of the art, or whether because their instructor wasn't using judo yet and he just called it jiu-jitsu, and so they called it jiu-jitsu, it's not really clear which one of those it is. The Brazilians said no, jiu-jitsu as opposed to judo, right? And so although that parent art is the same, it develops very differently in Japan, eventually entering the Olympics, and because of the Olympics eliminating a lot of the dangerous, in quotation marks, techniques. Whereas in Brazil, they're cut off from Japan. Their teacher was Japanese, but once he disappeared, it just developed really within the Gracie family, and a few others, but isolated from Japan. And so they were more interested in street fighting, and we train with a gi, but sometimes we don't train with a gi. And I don't really care if that technique is legal in Japan because it works. You know, if it breaks your ankle, I'm fine with it, even if they've banned it. And they just did a lot of no holds barred fight. I mean, vale tudo was the Brazilian word, and it just means everything goes. And that is the precursor of modern MMA. And that's how it starts. How it develops from there is long, and it gets bigger. But the interesting thing, and before I turn it over to Travis, because he's going to have all these other points that he wants to talk about, the interesting thing for me that other people don't know, and since this question was like, wow, I didn't know that, is that even in Brazil until the UFC, which happened in America, a lot of Brazilians didn't know about Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. And then they see Royce Gracie. I mean, they started for the same reasons we started. You see this kind of skinny Brazilian kid beating the hell out of all these huge wrestlers and boxers and stuff.
Who's got their phone down here? Put it on airplane mode.
Yeah,
that's what that noise is.
And so even the explosion of jiu-jitsu in Brazil was a kind of re-importation of their own martial art from America after the UFC, because until then it was really a family affair. It was the Gracies and their cousins and best friends and a really small, tight-knit group of people who were doing it. And it didn't explode in Brazil really until, when would that have been, 1992 or something? 91? Yeah, okay.
So post-UFC, it actually
reintroduced to Brazil. Yeah.
I would imagine in the U.S. that the UFC has probably helped elevate people's interest in it as well. So probably globally, safe to say that when the UFC came about.
I don't think we'd be sitting here right now talking about Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu without the first UFC.
The first UFCs were amazing. I remember listening to an interview with Tank Abbott. Like, that's the only name I remember because it was on VHS and we would come watch it. And he was like, yeah, I was on a bar stool 72 hours ago. Guy said he couldn't make it, so I finished my steak and my beer and I'm in. And was just pounding a dude in, like, Converse.
Right. Yeah, bare knuckles, no weight classes.
That's all that I remember was him, yeah.
I believe back then Horian owned the UFC, right?
Yep.
I mean, so the Gracies actually started the UFC.
Did they really?
Yep.
And it was a platform for them to show the world the power of jiu-jitsu, right? Because up until then, there was always this debate, like growing up, karate, kung fu, Tank Abbott, street fighter, boxer, wrestler. And they were pretty confident, and rightfully so, that if you put somebody in there who knew Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and had them fight somebody who had no idea what it was, that the result would be what they got.
Which, again, from my limited exposure, even to the UFC, like, honestly, I know the UFC is huge. I might watch a little bit of a fight, but the result, I'm like, okay, like, people are going to get in there and pound each other's head, and I get it. But there's a reason why the Tank Abbotts of the world have gone away.
Yeah.
And everybody's game, you hear Joe talk about it all the time, like, you have to be well-rounded. Tank might get a hold of you, but if you close the distance and somebody gets him and they scoop it to the ground, that guy's underwater.
Well, there's two things I think that people need to keep in mind, because now that I'm older now, I'm 44, and my exposure to Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu was 1,000 times different than what somebody coming into Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu today would be. Just like with the sport of MMA, it wasn't a sport back then. The first 4, if you remember, there were no gloves. Mm-hmm. Groin strikes were legal.
No weight classes.
Headbutts were legal.
Couldn't you eye? Or the only thing you couldn't do was eye gouge,
you
right?
couldn't eye gouge or bite. That was it. That was it. I mean, you
love it.
But that was Horian's vision. Yeah. That's the Brazilian vision.
I mean, Royce Gracie pulled Chemo's scalp off, if you remember, grabbed him by the ponytail and just like ripped his hair right out of his head.
Do not remember, but that I'm sure will be found on YouTube very shortly after we're done.
But so a lot of the guys who argue now are arguing in the context of the current UFC, which has weight classes, which has trained fighters on both sides, which has gloves, which has rules, to keep the fighters somewhat safe.
Yeah.
They weren't exposed to the UFC when it was truly no holds barred. You fought 3 times in the same night. I mean, it was a tournament style. There was no weight classes.
That's right. They did fight multiple times.
And so when people make the arguments like, well, but if this was allowed, like if I could headbutt, then this would happen, or if I could do this, then this would happen. Well, that already happened. I mean, we're having conversations about something that's already been proven.
Yeah.
And it's just that the guys in their 20s now, they weren't around in 1991. So they don't even remember. The UFC that they're seeing on TV is a sport.
Yeah. And
what we were watching back then was a lot closer to a fight.
I remember, it's funny, coming from a military background, I don't even know what to call it, the hand-to-hand skills. That's what the military guys call it. Each individual force, Army, Marines, like everybody's got their, like, we got our like, we can't teach you our stuff. It's so good. And there was a guy in one of the early UFCs who was a Ranger, an Army Ranger. And believe me, I have nothing but respect for those guys. But I'm almost positive he got into the ring with an art form that he called Ranger Do or something like that, and immediately got murked.
Yeah.
But he was in a pair of UDT shorts, which don't even go to Google and see what they are. We got to issue them in buds. They're like booty shorts, but shorter. Why they make us wear those in training is just ridiculous, but I'm almost positive he got into the ring with those. And I know for a fact, too, knowing how the military training system worked back in the day where there wasn't multiple touch points coming in and we were very insular, we would just do stuff in and amongst ourselves and talk about how good we are. And don't tell anybody else and punch me. No, not like that. Punch me like this. And I think that's exactly what happened. And now, from what I still maintain some pretty good touch points, it's all become very gray, and it all has a background. It seems to be in either slightly Krav-based for the stand-up, but all of the ground skills is all back to a jiu-jitsu-based skill, which goes to show you, like, the only thing we care about in the military, specifically the community I came from, is success. Like, you say it works and it failed, next. You say it works and it worked, devote more time. And then it goes along, well, we just got trumped by something else, so we're going to put that on pause. We're going to lift over here. Can we combine the two? But it comes back time and time again to those skills, and it's God, I'd forgotten about those multiple fights.
Yeah.
in the UFC.
Well, and if you remember, I mean, Hoist Gracie, I believe, won the first 4, or at least 3 out of the first 4.
Yeah.
And he was 185 pounds.
Yeah.
And he fought in his gi, which is another thing guys forget, right? Because the first thing they do is they come in and they make fun of the pajamas, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, wait a second, if you remember, Hoist was 185 pounds fighting in the pajamas against guys like Ken Shamrock, Tank Abbott. Remember the Hawaiian bone breaker? That was his art.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, the boxer with one glove. I mean,
Art Jimerson.
Dan Severn. That was actually the fight that got me into the UFC. Me and my brother.
When he triangled
Dan Severn. If you remember, his big wrestler, big mustache, black Speedo. And he was on top.
Which that is unacceptable. The mustache is fine. The Speedo is fine. Do not combine the two.
But he had almost like broken people's necks, just picking them up and suplexing them backwards onto their heads.
I think he was from like Detroit, somewhere in Michigan or something. And he was on top of Hoist, and we're watching
for like 5 minutes.
We're watching the fight on VHS.
Yeah.
And Jim Brown was the announcer, and he didn't know what happened. He identified Dan Severn as the winner, and then all of a sudden, the ref holds up Hoist's hand, and everyone's like, "What just happened?" So we're watching it in slow motion on rewind. Well, he got triangle choked, but I had no idea what that was. It was like magic back then. I mean, so it was literally that fight, that technique that caused me and my brother to go find Matt Thornton on MLK Boulevard in Portland, Oregon, and be like, we got to learn this Brazilian Jiu Jitsu stuff.
So to go backwards, because when you found Matt, how did it make the jump from Brazil to the U.S.? Because obviously...
Horian.
Okay, so he moved...
Yeah.
It was California, right? That's what we were talking about over dinner?
Yep.
And then he started teaching...
Only out of his garage, because no one wanted to learn. He was doing odd jobs and getting bit parts in Hollywood. You can Google him and find him on Three's Company dating Chrissy or whatever. He walks in and he's her Mexican date. Yeah.
Awesome.
But their
no
big
stereotyping in that.
No, none. Their big break actually was Horian. He knew certain people in Hollywood, and he got to be the fight choreographer for the first Lethal Weapon.
Okay.
And if you go back and watch it, Mel Gibson triangles Gary Busey to finish that fight.
I'm watching it tonight.
Right?
Yeah, I never would have thought that.
But it's good. If you know jiu-jitsu, there are legit fight scenes. Like when I watched it, I'm like, where's the jumping kicks? Where's the big, like, John Wayne right hands? Yeah. But now I watch it, and I'm like, oh, Horian actually choreographed in all these jiu-jitsu sequences. It's pretty cool. And then from there, he met Art Davies, right? And then designed the whole UFC format. But he was teaching out of his garage and teaching largely private classes. And in Brazil, it had been a lot of private classes. And they didn't have big group classes where people would spar the way we do today. It was more like he'd teach them a self-defense curriculum. Mm. But slowly, it sort of moved into, well, I have too many people. And it's kind of like CrossFit. We can't run private anymore. How about the 3 of you combine?
And the economics.
At 1 o'clock. Sense. And how about the 4 of you combine? And it's, hey, these classes are actually a little bit better than this one-on-one thing. Yeah, and it grew from there.
So you found Matt, Martin Luther King Boulevard, which every apparently city in the U.S. has one, because every city I've been into has one. you were driven to find him because of what you saw, and then that's just water. Yeah,
okay.
That's fine. Because I want to hear from both of you guys. So, tell me about how you found it and how your initial journey was. Because, I mean, obviously we're not in or on Martin Luther King Boulevard right now. Things have progressed since there. So I want to kind of hear where you guys branched apart in your journey and then where you connected as well.
Well, so for me, my brother and I have been in lots of fights. Well, in hindsight, they were more like assaults, but
we all go through that phase in our life.
And so we found Matt along with another coworker because we were doing construction at the time. And
how did you find him? Because this sounds like pre-internet.
There was no internet really that we were using.
Yeah.
And I didn't have a computer at home or anything, and I didn't have a smartphone. I think it was the phone book. To be honest with you, it was either that or it was Black Belt magazine. Because he was selling a lot of videos out of the back of Black Belt magazine.
And writing articles, and he was pretty aggressive.
He had a sandwich board out on the sidewalk on MLK. Had like the big yin yang, Jeet Kune Do, Bruce Lee type thing.
The bait and switch. You get him in.
Yeah. So it wasn't a true stalker scenario. He was out there in the public specter, and you tracked him down. You didn't stalk him.
He had a school, and we went in there, and it was Robert Follis actually. Was there. He was running most of Matt's classes back then. Matt was doing a lot of seminars. And the three of us walked in there. We signed up. Our buddy Kent, who actually found the place, and called us and said, "Hey, I found that Brazilian Jiu Jitsu place." He bailed within about a month. My brother and I never looked back.
What was the intro? Why did he bail? Because I have questions about initial exposure to people, because I've seen and heard of many different approaches.
Well, and let me preface this too by saying, like, if anyone's listening to this, obviously I don't want this to taint them or turn them off to jiu-jitsu, because 20 years have gone by since then and we're a lot smarter. The training methods are a lot better. Things have only improved over time, not gotten worse. Back then we didn't know what we were doing. The training methods were pretty rough.
Describe what you mean by that.
We were just trying to learn how to fight. We were teaching ourselves how to fight. So
you jumped into a Shark Tank?
Yeah,
pretty much.
All right.
And Matt was running a school half, I think, because he wanted to run a school, and half he wanted sparring partners to beat up.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I was training with Randy Couture was with us back then.
Oh wow.
Matt Linland, Chael Sonnen, Jeff Munson, Nate Corey. Ed Herman was one of my students. It was wild. It was like the who's who back then. I remember when I sparred with Forrest Griffin when he was still part of the organization. Then Matt, he got up through purple belt with Matt, but it was really rough. So the very first class, the night we sign up, 100% sparring. I don't know anything. I'm choking guys with my chest, like I'm grabbing them by the back of their head and just jamming their face into my chest, and teaching myself how to guillotine people. I have a rough idea from watching videos like how you're supposed to choke somebody, but I'd never been taught it correctly. And so my brother and I were already kind of cut from that sort of cloth, and so it worked fine for us. I think Kent, in hindsight, was like the majority of the people who came through our doors back then, and we just weeded them out. And in hindsight, I feel guilty of it, to be honest with you, which is why I preface this answer by saying, look, what we do now is strengthen the weak. Here we have this perfect martial art for making people better versions of themselves, giving weak people strength, making insecure people confident. And we used it in the opposite way, which was to kind of run those people out and then take the wrestlers and the boxers and the street fighters and the guys that were already tough, who really didn't need Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu as much as the other people, and we ran them out. And so now I'm kind of almost trying to make up for that in the last 10 years, make up for the first few.
How many women was Matt teaching at that time?
Oh my God, there was. we would have like one, and it would always be somebody crazy, right?
Yeah.
There was no women back then.
That's what I assumed. Given that type of introduction, that would be extremely difficult.
And now you look at the gym here, 25% of my student base is female.
Which I think is awesome.
Yeah. Oh, it says a lot about our teaching methods now.
Well, and the efficacy of what you're teaching.
Right.
I actually really enjoy learning from Leah, because I know I can out bench press her, but I literally cannot move. I'm like, okay, I should win this. I'm contractile potential. I'm stronger. Tap, I guess. I got nothing. If you want to talk about proof in the pudding, that's right. the lever and the technique and all of that stuff completely trumps any strength that I might have developed over my life. I'm like, okay, this works.
Yeah, that's a great example.
Yeah.
I've watched Leah run more than a few of the guys out of the gym just because their egos they're not prepared for that.
Yeah.
You know?
You have to be okay with yourself to be comfortable. Like, all right, a woman just kicked my ass. It's like, all right, like, get over it. Maybe you could learn something from that person, or perhaps you're an asshole and can't get out of your own way, and there's the door.
And yeah, we'd rather not teach them jiu-jitsu.
Well, you're giving somebody who probably would do.
He'd abuse it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how did you find jiu-jitsu?
So I, lifelong martial artist. I started just in the neighborhood because, you know, SoCal, Santa Cruz, just not a lot of options.
So we should address how ridiculously small the world is too. So were you born in Santa Cruz?
No, born in LA. Folks moved us up to Santa Cruz when I was 2.
Yeah. So I was literally born and raised from Dominican Hospital in Santa
Well,
Cruz.
both my younger brothers Dominican.
There you go.
Yeah. But I was LA.
Yeah. But yeah, so yesterday or Saturday, talking with John, come to find out we're from the same place, know the same people. The world got closer and closer and closer. So you went to SoCal High, which we competed against with all of our major sports.
Right.
My dad attended SoCal High. His father was involved in the building of SoCal High.
Yeah.
Was it your brother that has played against sports
Yep.
in Santa Cruz?
Tom owns Play It Against Sports.
Which is what sourced a lot of the gear for the original CrossFit program,
Yeah.
which I was my off-ramp from the military, was working. It's like, and then Rob Wolf, I'm like, what's going on here?
Yeah.
This is ridiculous.
So I had been interested in martial arts since I can remember, and did the local stuff because there wasn't that much local. When I went off to college, I kind of branched out a little bit and got a bit more serious about it, because in high school, you know, I was playing water polo and swimming. And
You played water polo too?
yeah.
That was my sport.
See, there we go. This is crazy. But you know, that takes a lot of time, and so I was almost like a seasonal martial artist. And I went to Berkeley. I still remember this. So I go to Berkeley my freshman year. I'm like, I'm going to just walk on for water polo. They're not going to give me a scholarship, but I was good in high school, and I'm going to walk on. And I'm going through the rec center, sports center, and I finally find where the water polo team has their lockers. And I'm like, I look up at these guys, and I'm like, you're the basketball team, right? You're 7 feet tall. And they're like, no, we're the water polo team. I'm like, I guess I'll just go study, because I'm not going to play college water polo. It's like,
They're probably all Eastern Bloc guys too.
they were just huge. I mean, not tall and skinny either, like tall and just
Chiseled.
jacked. Yeah, like 250 pounds. And I'm like,
And for people who don't understand water polo, because they watch it from above the camera angle, like, yeah, it doesn't look that bad. You're swimming around and throwing a ball. Like, yeah, put the camera under the
jiu-jitsu
water.
is going on underwater the whole time.
I wore
Right?
3 Speedos, and sometimes that wasn't enough.
Yeah, they'll tear your suit off to get you out of the water, because if you're only wearing 1 or 2, what are you going to do?
Sharpening fingernails and toenails. You want to talk about getting your hooks in? It was just right in the Speedo and just
Yeah.
You perfect the stroke comes over and, hey, buddy, an elbow to the back of the face. It's pretty gnarly.
Yeah. So I devoted more time to martial arts because I couldn't play water polo or swim.
Which martial art were you doing at this time?
It's called Kuksuruan. It's a Korean martial art. It's like Hapkido.
Okay.
But the reason I went to that is because their advertising was like jiu-jitsu. We do kicks and punches and throws and ground fighting. They don't. I mean, they do, but they don't. None of it's functional. But I was attracted to it for that. I did that very religiously. And then when I went to Korea the first couple times, I was able to train over there, and that was good. But I was introduced to jiu-jitsu before the first UFC, so I'm kind of rare in that sense, because a buddy of mine from Berkeley, who's a Japanese Hawaiian kid, he's a little older than I am, but he's over back in Hawaii now, and I stopped to see him on my way back, because back then I was flying Northwest Airlines, and you get like $50 to stop in Honolulu on the way back to San Francisco. I'm like, yeah, I'll stop there. And I already had like a 2nd degree black belt or something, maybe a 3rd degree black belt, and he's like, oh, I'm doing this new thing called Gracie Jiu-Jitsu. This is 1989, so 2-3 years before the first UFC. And I said, yeah, whatever, I'm doing martial arts too, I don't care. And he's like, no, it's different. And he was a white belt from Helsing Gracie. This is the second Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu school in America. So Horian opened in Torrance, his brother Helson opened in Honolulu. And Glenn is like, no, it's different. And he's like, check this out. And he mounted me, and he's like, escape. And I'm like, this is going to take like 10 seconds, because I know all my Korean martial art escapes. And 3 minutes later, I was almost puking, and he was just laughing at me. I could do nothing, right? And so from that moment on, I'm like, I will find a way to do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. But I went back and did a master's degree in Korea, and I was watching Horian and Hoist's early tapes and kind of studying with my friends, but it wasn't the same as being in an academy.
I was going to say, that's got to be a hard medium to learn through. Watch somebody on a tape and then try to figure
Not
out.
ideal.
Yeah.
Not ideal. But the moment that I finished my master's degree, I moved back. I stayed in Santa Cruz about 2 weeks to see my folks, and I moved down to LA and signed up at Hickson's Academy. Because I knew that Hickson... this is another thing. Going back to the UFC, Horian's very, very, very intelligent. And he put Hoist in. He knew almost anyone in his family could win that event. But Hoist was actually the least physically imposing, like when you look at him. Mm-hmm. And Hickson looks like an athlete, and he is an athlete. And they thought, well, Hickson will kick the hell out of him, but he'll probably do it in a Speedo and look like the model that he is.
Potentially a coat of olive oil?
Yeah, and people will think like, well, it's not jiu-jitsu, it's that this guy's like a physical specimen. Yeah. And everyone looks at Hoist and it's like, he's going to get murdered. He's going to get murdered. So
that was the person to make a point with.
Yeah, so that was a strategic decision, but everyone assured me, but Hickson is the man. And so I just went straight to Hickson and started there. Yeah.
What was your first day like?
They were so Hickson was a bit more structured. You had to take private lessons, and a bit more expensive too. You had to take private lessons until you were cleared for a group class. And private lessons back then, $40 for 30 minutes. So I was training 2 hours a month, one time a week at 30 minutes.
Wow.
For $160 a month, 25 years ago. What would that be today? $500 a month? I don't know. Anyway.
If not more.
But that's Travis and I talk about all this time. It's like, how bad do you want it? I didn't have any money. I was a student. And it's like, I want to do this. I need to learn this,
So how did you, because now let's fast forward, Travis, owner of Straight Blast in Kalispell.
And Whitefish.
And Whitefish.
And Missoula.
And Missoula.
And vice president of the international organization.
Keep going. All right, cool.
Paid for it?
How did you achieve that spot? So you started teaching or learning underneath Matt. At some point, obviously, I'll make an assumption you started teaching underneath him, and then at some point you just created the physical infrastructure here. But why Kalispell? What drew you here to where we are?
Well, so that's a long story, but...
this is a long-form conversation. Get it.
Okay, well, I started teaching for Matt immediately. Within 6 months of joining the gym, I knew there was nothing else I'd want to do.
Yep.
So I paid him up front for a lifetime membership.
What were you doing for a living at this time?
Sweeping out houses. I had a pregnant wife. We lived in an apartment off of Southeast Waverly in Portland, Oregon. And this goes back to what John was saying, right? Like, I don't have a lot of sympathy because the reality is this. I was making $8 an hour, okay? My wife is like 9 months pregnant with my oldest son. We're living in an apartment. Had an adult roommate at the time, I think. And I ended up giving Matt $3,600, which was what it cost to do a lifetime membership back then.
Yep.
Best investment I ever made.
Which literally meant lifetime. Like there was no asterisks.
No, no asterisks.
Lifetime means 10 years.
Yep, that was it. That was it. But and I went through his instructor's candidate course, is what it was called back then, ICC, and started teaching immediately. Fell in love with it. And then I got through purple belt, and then my wife and I were running a custom home business at that time. We ran it right into the ground. It was pretty embarrassing. We're like $500,000 upside down. Managed to pay everybody off, but was too embarrassed really to live in that area anymore. I'm seeing all these subs and suppliers that know I'm a failure, like I messed up. And I'd go apologize and, beg people, don't lean my job so that I can at least pay you when the house sells, And so this opportunity came up to move to Kalispell, Montana. I didn't even know Montana existed. Like literally, I grew up in Southern California. Like,
did your wife have any roots here? Or?
No. Wow. No, we had no family, no friends.
Came in blind?
Nothing. We had 4 kids at the time. Only one of them was even old enough to be in school. And opportunity came up. My wife had a real estate license. I was a general contractor. And it looked like a sweet deal. And so we moved up, company truck, gas card, health insurance for the whole family. My wife was getting all the listings. I was building all the houses. I was getting a percentage of the profit. And this was in like 2007, right about the time the financial crisis hit.
Yeah.
And so November of the first year that I moved here, I got laid off. And my wife wasn't selling any houses, couldn't sell anything. Nobody was buying. And my kids were on state health insurance. My oldest son has a severe seizure disorder. And, we looked at each other and it's like, well, now what, right? Like, what do we do now? And, we could have crawled into a corner and cried about it, I guess. And, my 4 kids could have starved or whatever, but it's like, well, look, I know how to teach jiu-jitsu. She knew how to teach yoga. And so we opened up a tiny little place where it was like, I think one of the political offices, but then most recently it was an Oriental massage parlor across the street from our current location.
A lot of bleach involved in that cleanup and
this was
demo.
Fortunately, that was after we left. But no, it was like 750 square feet for $750 a month, cinder block building, swamp cooler. And that's how we started. I borrowed a little bit of money from the developer that I was working for. He was nice enough to loan me a little bit of money. Borrowed a little bit of money from her dad to buy the materials and the props and the mats and things like that. And then we just never looked back. And that's another thing too. I just took a fantastic seminar the weekend before down in Portland with Henry Akins, one of Hickson's black belts. And
you referenced him a few times this weekend, yeah.
And one of the cool things he said was a lot of people in the jiu-jitsu world, especially now, are confused that they feel like they have to train with people that are better than them to get good at jiu-jitsu. And that's just not true. I mean, I moved here as a purple belt and surrounded myself with people who had never trained jiu-jitsu before. And I found a way to train that I could continue to get better. I eventually got my brown belt, my black belt. And during that time, we grew out of that 750 square feet to the building that we're in now, which is over 7,000 square feet. And I think as of today, we had like 471 students at that one location. So it was interesting because I was hearing you talk earlier today too about, you don't have to be trained, schooling, in order to start a business and be successful.
Yeah.
And so for my 4 kids now, and even for my
students, it might be a detriment, actually,
right?
Depending on how deep you get ingrained in that.
I feel like the thing that's going to define success or not success, I guess failure would be a better word than not success. But what's going to define success, I think, in life is, are you doing something that you truly care about? Are you passionate about what you're doing? Because if you're on fire for something, you will get better at it. And actually, John said something that stuck with me this week, and hopefully you guys were paying attention, when he said, in order to get good at jiu-jitsu, you have to like jiu-jitsu more than winning.
Yep.
Right? And see, for me and Kisa, my wife, it was a no-brainer. She had been doing yoga for longer than I had been doing jiu-jitsu, and for the same reasons, right? She was getting the same thing out of yoga that I was getting out of jiu-jitsu. I think it's just easier to get that out of jiu-jitsu than it is out of a solitary practice like yoga. But so that, I guess did that answer your question? Is that
it did?
Okay.
Yeah, and I'm assuming from there you just kind of, once you had your business, it built, and then the relationship with Matt continued as the organization grew.
Yeah. So. Matt is not the easiest person to get close to. He's very standoffish. He's somewhat, not somewhat. He's definitely a recluse. He's a introvert, and he couldn't tell me and my brother apart for the first 4 years. Like, he'd call each other by the wrong name.
You guys twins?
No. Nope.
I could tell them apart on the first day.
You see, I have friends that are twins, not identical ones, and I can immediately tell them apart.
Over time, Matt and I developed a bond. He started taking me on trips with him as a purple belt, like to Ireland and places like that. That's where I first met John Kavanagh, actually. But eventually, that bond kind of grew, and he started to gain some respect for me, just watching how I handle my business. Not just business, but like my wife or my kids and everything. And one day he asked me, he's like, "Hey, do you want to be the vice president?" Because at the time, the guy who was the vice president was no longer with the organization. I was like, yeah, I'll do that. And since then, we've opened more locations. and the organization's just, I mean, continued to balloon.
How many are there straight blast gyms?
Actual full gyms, there's over 60 in the world.
Wow. How many countries?
We're in the U.S., Canada, Sweden, Ireland, England, Scotland, Iceland, South Africa, Australia, Korea. Am I missing?
No, I don't think you may be missing something, but it's also deceptive because there are a lot of people who've been heavily influenced by straight blast who have broken away, and that's sort of the negative side.
Yeah.
And on the positive side, like my group, gosh, I probably have 20 gyms under me, but they're not SBG officially because they can't really deal in English and they can't really hear the message. And I don't run a gym, but my students through me, I feel, are SBG, but his number would go up by like 25%
or more,
33% right there as well. You know?
So, I mean, so you live full time in Korea, right?
Correct.
How did you land there?
So I studied, no plans,
Yep.
complete series of coincidences, but I did study East Asian languages in college, and then I narrowed my focus to Korea, and then I went first to do a year abroad as an undergrad, then I liked it. I went back and did an MA, and then was back and forth a lot. And when I was done with my PhD coursework, I moved back for a full year. That's 99. That's when I started jiu-jitsu in Korea. So, hey, June. So what's that, 9 months from now? 10 months from now? Will be 20 years of jiu-jitsu in Korea. It's the year I married my wife. And it's funny because she's Korean, and one of the big stumbling blocks wasn't the racial issue. Her father asked me, like, you're moving to America, right? You're going to be a professor in America. I'm like, yeah, I really believe that. And he was freaked out about that. Not that I was American. He's like, you're taking my oldest daughter to America. We're like, she doesn't know anybody. And they come from a big, very tight-knit family. And she's like, my father-in-law was, I'm here, but she has a brother and she has uncles, and and like, you're the only guy she knows there. Are you up to this task? That was his real problem. And I said yes, and he gave us his blessing. But we moved back like 3-4 years later, just randomly. I mean, I finished the PhD. I actually ran a martial arts school. So Rob Wolf and I opened the 4th CrossFit ever in Chico, California, and I was running a jiu-jitsu program out of there. I didn't like doing it full time. It's a personality thing, and I love jiu-jitsu, but I didn't like the business of martial arts. It's so self-evidently wonderful to me that I couldn't bring myself to sell it to other people. He's much nicer. No, he wants to improve people's lives, and I was like, if you don't get it, I don't want to talk to you, which isn't good, right? So I knew it wasn't right for me.
It limits your pool of people you can draw from, for sure.
And so a job opened up in Korea, and I took it, but I only signed a 2-year contract because I wasn't sure, but it turned out to be perfect, and I've been there. Well, that would have been 13, 14 years, and I see myself retiring there. I get back a lot, which is nice. I'm at a university, so I can be back a couple months in the summer and a couple months in the winter, but I see myself staying there. Yeah.
What do you teach?
Korean literature, so it's a fit for me to be over there.
That is a topic I know nothing about. God bless you for digging in deep on that one. Yeah,
he speaks better Korean than Koreans.
That doesn't surprise me. I can see your the academic world you're teaching. You can tell the difference immediately, right? Somebody who knows how to teach and who has taught before, and somebody who has not and is stumbling their way through it. You can see, like, okay, this individual is comfortable speaking. He can reduce it down to some simple, even though it's a complex issue, some simple things that you can build on. Going back to what you said about, or actually what you made a comment about what he said open in the seminar. Love BJJ more than winning. I love that. And the one thing that I think that I like the most about it that I keep hearing, and I don't know if people are saying it, and I don't know if it's foundational to the course or a lot, but I like it because it's stop trying to move other people. Just move yourself. Because there's always, and to me that resonates with me because it's very easy, I think, for people to point at others to look for the issue. It's like, all right, that's a variable. You can't control that, but I can control me. If I get pissed, I can control how I behave. All of this stuff. So I constantly heard that reinforced, and then I'll catch myself like trying to shove something. Like, God damn it. Because it's the classic losing control of your emotions or whatever it is. It's like, I'm just going to move me.
Right.
And it works. So that, to me, those are some of the key things that I have definitely enjoyed so far. That and the fact that it obviously works, because I just get completely gumbied every single time. Like, what's going on here?
It gets better.
Yeah.
But you know, I mean, I think what you just said is like one of the coolest things about jiu-jitsu. Like, that's one of a million principles
Yeah.
that show up on the mat that also translate to real life. Because like the one you're talking about, I talk about it all the time, that you can only control yourself.
Yep.
And it's crazy that we go around day to day thinking we can control everybody else.
And trying to, not only thinking that we can, exerting effort.
I mean, my new thing now is I've just stopped complaining about when people screw up. And I'm just like, what could have I done different so that they wouldn't have been such a screw up?
Yep.
You know, because I can't fix their screw ups. But maybe there's something I could have controlled about my actions or the way that I handled myself in that situation that would have had a different outcome for them. And to me, that's kind of how jiu-jitsu works too. It's like, if I just worry about what I can do with my body, then I don't have to be trying to fix people or force things all the time.
Well, and you can only control your body anyway. So all that energy bleed, like you kept saying, like, don't know. And anything beyond X on the lever is like, it's beneficial for him and disadvantage to me. So find that point and then just stop and let the train come off the tracks and hold on for dear life. What's the average, anecdotally, what would you say, average percentage of people who come in the door the first day and stick with it? What would be a long period of time? I would assume it would be stay with it for the rest of their life in some capacity, or 10 years. But what would you say the attrition rate would be for somebody starting day one? And to use a metric that I don't know if it's important or not, but people trying to achieve their black belt, how many people get there?
Well, everybody who doesn't quit gets to black belt.
It's just a matter of time between.
Everybody will get there. The only people who don't make it to black belt are people that quit. But just as a gym owner, I could tell you, the funny thing is, most people quit in the first 30 days. So they quit in the first 30 days. That's where the highest attrition rate is. That makes sense. But what doesn't make so much sense is where the second place that most people quit is, until you think about it. And the next highest level of attrition happens after they receive their blue belt.
I would have guessed purple.
Blue belt. And I think the reason why is because even to get a blue belt in jiu-jitsu requires, 12 to 24 months of training, depending on how often you can be on the mat. And, everybody's going to learn a little bit different. But what happens is I think they get so focused on that being a goal that they have this sense of, I achieved it. And they forget, and they don't. Their coach isn't good enough to say, hey, Andy, that's great. You got your blue belt. Here's what you got to work on to get your purple belt. They don't have a coach that's going to reset their goals for them. So every time somebody achieves one of their goals, it's important as a coach, whether it be a fitness goal, a weight loss goal, whatever, that we reset their goals for them and help them say, okay, this is good. Let's celebrate this, but now let's get ready for the next step, the next challenge. So most people quit within the first 30 days, and then after that, it's after they get their blue belt, the first belt.
So they've actually been at it for a year, even potentially
a year to 2 years. Yeah, I have lots of people that don't get their blue belt until after 18, 24 months.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And just to clarify, black belt, that's also like some very, very special individuals, 5 years, I would say average about 10, but I agree that anyone could, in theory, potentially get a black belt, but it could take you 15, 20 years.
Yeah.
It's not like, if you sign up for this lesson program, I promise you a belt in this amount of time. But
some people probably take to it better than others or have more time to dedicate. That makes sense to me.
No.
I mean, I don't think jiu-jitsu's unique in that it requires hours of practice, just like, archery or surfing, skateboarding, you name it, playing music. The difference, I think, is some people's life, like I think hearing like where John came into jiu-jitsu and where I came into jiu-jitsu, with a wife that was pregnant, and then I had 3 more, 4 kids under 4, a full-time job.
Which is insane, by the way. 4 kids under 4 is psychotic.
I know.
So, but in order to be able to put those 10,000 hours on the mat, it took me years. But if somebody would have sponsored me and said, hey, you know what, Travis, all you have to do is train jiu-jitsu, eat, and sleep. We got you covered. Well, then I would hope it wouldn't take me 10 years. I would hope that I could have gotten it in 5 years, 6 years.
Yeah.
Because I would have been on the mat that much more. So it's not time in the sense of years, but it's time in the sense of hours put into the practice.
The belt system is, again, both of you guys know how long I have not been at this, which is like my entire life except for the last month. The belt system to me, I look at it and I don't think I'm a student of human behavior at all, but I will watch people come in and the first thing they'll do is they'll look at you and then they look down. So what you used to see in the military is they look at you and then the collar device for your rank was right on your chest and they look at that. It's like, well, okay. There's a couple ways I can look at this. One, if you're only concerned with that, I'm going to win this head game immediately because who cares what it is? And who know, how many BJJ schools do you think there are? Like hundreds, probably, right?
Thousands.
And they all have belts, right? And so you guys, I saw there's the belts up in the SBG gym, but what there's not is like a list of to get this belt. You know what I mean? There's not a written protocol of this belt equals this. And I would assume that each gym has their own protocol for it, and then there might be a little bit of a disconnect. So much like the rank system in the military, I mean, it might mean a particular position. Whether or not the individual lives up to it is a huge variable. So, I mean, what is the rank or the belting system in jiu-jitsu, or in your opinion, in the SBG system? What does it really mean? Is it time in the saddle? Is it experience level? Like, what is it? Because a black belt at another gym, I'm sure you guys have run into this, roll with a black belt and you're like, what's going on here? Like a drastic difference in skill.
Sure.
But in that individual's pipeline, they've achieved the criteria. So I'm just curious where all of the belt stuff comes into play, because it seems to be, it's subjectively based, I'm assuming, if there's no written protocol based on the coach. What does the belt mean to you guys?
I'll give 2 brief answers because he's going to have a better, longer answer, just being more hands-on day to day. I still promote people, and I tell them my ideal is they're a really good athlete competitor and a really good coach, and those things intersect like right in the middle. That's textbook. And then if someone's a super good competitor and not such a good coach, they can get a belt. I mean, I'm not, if a guy wins the world championships 2 years in a row at purple belt, I'm not going to be like, oh, you've only been purple belt 1 year and 1 month, so I'm going to make you wait. Yeah, there's none of that. Like, you better go to brown belt since you just killed every purple belt in the universe. On the other end, we have guys who started, later in life, or women who start later in life, or someone maybe started young in life, and we have people starting like this guy has one hand, and he wants to do jiu-jitsu, and he's not going to have a great collar choke,
He's going to have some limitations.
Yeah, and so, but it's like,
Are bionic hands allowed in competition? We just grab the gi and
make him tap.
No.
Make him tap. But I mean, so whatever the limitations are, I expect those people to be better technicians and coaches. I don't expect them to win world championships. Any of those people can get the belt, but this side can be a little bit quicker because wow, you just won that 2 years in a row. This side may take a little longer, and I'd like to see everyone shooting for that middle ground, but that is still very subjective, right? Mm-hmm. So, but that's kind of where my head is when I watch people.
What are your thoughts, Travis?
Well, back to the beginning. In the beginning, we threw the baby out with the bathwater, meaning back to SBG, right? Back to SBG. We had an anarchy symbol on the gorilla. That was because we had a shirt with a black flag on it that said, where there is authority, there is no freedom. And that was Matt rallying against all the traditional martial arts. And so part of the traditional martial arts are, having titles, Sifu or Sensei or whatever, Professor, and belts and uniforms. And we threw that all out, not realizing that wasn't the problem. It was the training methods that were the problem, right? Because those other martial arts were martial at some point, or they wouldn't exist. It's just that at some point in history, they lost touch with the martial side, and the training methods became dead patterns, and they're just no longer functional. Mm. And so when I first started training with Matt, we didn't have belts. We didn't even have gis. And then that slowly came back in. And I would say the most... the biggest utility that the belt provides is for competition. So like if you were going to compete in Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, I wouldn't want you to compete with black belts. Or
I can tell you what the outcome would be.
So
Wouldn't be fun for either of you.
I know.
So for competitors, they function as a marker.
Is
right?
it kind of like where you are in your journey?
Right. But the reality is, those 471 students I talked about, the vast majority of them don't compete.
Mm-hmm.
So the vast majority of them don't need the belt as a competitor because they're not interested in competition, and competition is not necessary. Right?
Do you think it's important though, as far as
For
your
me,
understanding?
for me, yes. I'm a hugely competitive person. I competed with Frankl last year in Vegas at Masters. I'll tell you a story. Like when I got my brown belt, first thing I did was sign up for Worlds, and I competed at my weight. I competed at Absolute, and I did it kind of. Your question was the reason I did it, because it is somewhat subjective, and so I wanted to prove to myself, like, am I a brown belt? And what would be a good way to find out? Well, how about if I go roll with guys from all over the world at the highest level and see if I can roll with them at that level? Because if I can, I'm a brown belt, and if I can't, then I'm not. So I did that 2 years in a row, and then I got my black belt, and the very first thing I did was sign up for Pan Ams and competed as a black belt there. And then did the year after that. And then, this last year we decided to go down and do it again to see, so the belts, in a way, part of it is that, can you roll at this level? But what John was saying is also very important, because all things being equal, right? Let's say you were a 3rd degree black belt. That's going to be tough for me. Like, you're bigger, probably stronger. Like then if we both have the same technique, those attributes start to play a factor.
If you're equally matched in skill, then they'll come back into the equation.
So my wife just got her brown belt. She's like 5 feet. She's pretty small, 125 pounds. I don't expect her to be able to beat, say Jimmy, a male brown belt who's in his early 30s and much bigger and stronger than her. So we can't use just performance as the criteria. So there's other criteria at play. Are they using jiu-jitsu? I liked what John talked about at the seminar when he was talking about, I don't care if they're the outcome, but I care about what are they using to get the outcome, whether it's a failure or a success.
I
what
love
are
that
they,
too.
Yeah,
Start and finish with jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, that's and the
the
irony is that makes you win more.
The example you gave is perfect, and I'm gonna shot put you off.
Exactly. And it's so, and the funny thing about that is, for guys who have been in the game for 20 plus years, the guy doing the pushing thinks he's being sneaky and no one sees it, and for us it's so obvious. Like I can walk into a gym anywhere in the world, and it's like within seconds you can see who's doing that and who's not doing that.
Where does that really become so you're the guy who, let's go into the world of the shot putter. He's like whatever, ex-NFL athlete, massive, right? So he can get away with it. At what experience level that he starts encountering does that become an issue, and their technique trumps that shot?
So first, day one, he might just get unlucky, and it could be the weekend of the Matt Thornton seminar.
Yeah.
And then it's like, Matt will tell you like he's 6'7", 250, but he might be more like 6'8", 280. On any given day, he kind of grows and shrinks, but he's not getting shot putted off, and then you just get thrashed. Whereas, like, if I roll with Matt or Gus, a big black belt, he was like 6'6", lighter, but still
Gus. He's an imposing
he's
man.
still like it's like basketball players. You're like, oh, you're kind of skinny, and they're like, I weigh 260 because there's just so much body there, right? Gus can't be light.
He's about 200.
Yeah, maybe 205. You're not going to get him off with the shot put.
Yeah.
Partially because he's not 110 pounds, but partially like that wingspan and that leg span. They have the base, right? So you can push like. Me, maybe, because I talked about, like, if my shoulder goes outside my wrist, I'm going off. Yep. Gus's wrist is on that American flag over there.
100%, yes.
There's no visual. It's 10 feet away from me. Yeah. And
with
he's
the bend in the arm still.
Yeah, he's not going over. And then by the way, those bench pressers, it's like, okay, he's only 210 and you're 250, but how many times can you bench 210? So you're going to try it 5 times, 6 times, 7 times, and then you know how it is. You go to failure, and when you fail, then Gus eats your lunch,
because it's 260 laying on top of you, and that just kind of sucks.
Right. And it's not even, that's not a good analogy, because a barbell is so symmetrical and so balanced, whereas Gus is going to be flopping around, so it's more like moving sandbags that weigh that much, or water sacks even, and you're gonna gas out early, and then what? And then you're gonna get choked and go to sleep, I guess. But no, it starts earlier than you would think. Now, of course, 150-pound person is gonna have to get more to like high purple, brown belt, but then any pushing is an arm lock, 100%.
Yeah.
They're just you're gonna go here, and they're gonna be. It's just done. It doesn't take that long.
I would imagine that person too who prefers the shot put technique because of their size advantage probably wouldn't like the result, and that might be somebody who just like, I'm going to go out the door.
Yeah.
Come back.
I've seen a bicep torn from a
Right.
I may or may not have been the person on the other end of the arm, but
So speaking of that, you guys obviously have a ton of experience in this realm. Looking back on your career, question for both of you: biggest mistake you've made along the way? If you could go back and change one thing about an approach or something that happened along the way, what would it be?
oh man, I mean, it's simple for me because it resonated this weekend when John said you got to love jiu-jitsu more than winning. I mean, as a white belt and blue belt, I had a great guillotine choke, fantastic footlock, zero guard, because I refused, absolutely refused to be on my back. Why? Because I didn't want to lose any match, any drill. It didn't matter what we were doing. I wanted to be on top, and I wanted to win. So if you shot on me, I guillotined you. If you pulled guard, I footlocked you. That was it. No guard passing, no guard game. And I probably wasted 2 years of learning jiu-jitsu for winning.
Yeah. I got lucky a little bit because, and I tell people this, Hickson, for all his, no holds barred fights and everything, as a jiu-jitsu coach, was very interventionist, and he wouldn't let you do that, right? Because you weren't wrong. Most people want to win, and that's why I say it, because not to insult people, but like, I wish someone told me this day one. If I wish someone came in for a seminar and just said, hey, look, if you do this, I guarantee you'll get better results. No one did. We all learned by trial and error. So similar, I think he's a bit more competitive than I am. But I was lucky because Hickson was very, very hands-on, and he would just stop people, and they'd be, well, I got him with the Kimura, and he's like
he would stop a roll, just like knock it off.
He's like, you didn't learn that here. That's not jiu-jitsu. Like some wrestler would come in.
Oh, really?
Well, and he'd be like, well, he tapped, and Hickson would be like, yeah, but you could have tapped him before you learned jiu-jitsu. It's like, you are 220 pounds and you wrestled in college, and why would you do that here? It's like, you're paying me money and you're spending your time to learn jiu-jitsu. Do jiu-jitsu, right? And his version of jiu-jitsu was that, like, be on your back, be on top, be on the side, be on mount, And so I kind of I avoided that, or was instructed or pushed to avoid that. I think for me, maybe just training less consistently than I could have. Like, over time, organically, I got focused. Like, jiu-jitsu drew me in, and so I don't regret it because it was organic, but I think I was a bit distracted. I never quit, but I got distracted at times.
Shiny object?
Yeah, all kinds of different things. I don't know, it's not a big deal. I guess I don't have a huge regret, but that would be what comes to mind.
What's the best advice you would give to somebody starting?
Well, when people ask me, I always, especially in Korea, because they grew up on kung fu movies, and we did too, but, and I said, I end my seminars, I said, what's the secret to learning jiu-jitsu, and what's the shortcut? And they're like, flexibility or relaxation. They think I want to hear a certain word, and then I say, the secret is there is no secret. This is not kung fu. We're not hiding anything from you. We're going to give you everything. I want you to be better than me. If my students aren't better than me, I'm a failure as a coach. I shouldn't be taking their time and money. But I say, but if there is a secret, it's believe in jiu-jitsu. Don't game it. Just believe in it. It all works. And I already told you, I was like, be here tomorrow. Don't get injured. And the third or fourth is you have to have a good coach. And the more popular jiu-jitsu gets, the more phonies you're going to get. There's money in it.
That was going to be my next
question.
Okay,
so I do tell them there's a luck component involved, because this is how I started martial arts. It's like, it's better now with the internet because you can see where everyone is doing what, and charlatans tend to be exposed earlier, but most people will go where is close, and they might not know the difference between jiu-jitsu and judo and karate and kung fu, and they're just like, oh, this is like right by my house, or it's right by my office. And so there's a luck component of not getting hooked up with a less than qualified instructor. Having said that, we talked about this yesterday, no rehearsal for the podcast. It still doesn't matter, because if you are the one teaching good jiu-jitsu, they all come to you eventually. Like
much like the CrossFit methodology. That's why they don't worry about the number of affiliates, because they say, at least, I think it might be a little bit different in the strength and conditioning world, but you'll gravitate, and the cream will rise to the top.
Yeah. I find in Korea, a lot of people doing my advertising for me, in a sense. They bring in the white belts, but by blue belt, they're kind of like, this isn't really jiu-jitsu, is it? Because they go to some tournaments, or they visit some other school, one of my schools, and their coach gave them a purple belt, and some female one-stripe white belt triangle chokes them or whatever, and then they're like, oh, maybe I need to go to that school.
What do you think the biggest threat is to the modern day jiu-jitsu realm world? Is it the charlatans? Is it the misconceptions about what it is?
Threat in what sense? Like,
I guess it would derail the growth, or inhibit or prohibit people from having an interest in coming to.
I have kind of two answers for that, and I never got to the end of the belt progression, so I'll
start there.
I'll circle back on that, because the first one is blue belt's important, purple belt's important, brown belt's important. You're not going to ruin jiu-jitsu at any of those belts. Right? You could mess up and give someone a blue belt. You could mess up and give someone a purple belt. It's probably not going to happen, not within our organization. Give someone a brown belt. But when you start promoting people to black belt, that's where, for me personally, this is totally off the cuff, off the record as far as jiu-jitsu as a whole, but for me personally, as a coach, I've told all the black belts that I've given this, and I've told, like, Frankl's heard this, my coach has heard this, I will never give a black belt to somebody who I don't think is a black belt in life, regardless of how good their jiu-jitsu is. They could tap me 100 times out of 100. If they are not a black belt in life, I do not want them to. A black belt in any martial art is somebody who's going to be looked up to by children, somebody who's going to be modeled. So for me to be black belt, obviously you have to be able to grade other students. You have to have integrity. You have to be able to belt people. I mean, that's the difference between black belt and all the other belts, is now all of a sudden you can ruin jiu-jitsu in the way that you just kind of hinted at, which is having charlatans.
If you have a black belt, you can then issue belts to others, essentially?
Blue belt. Purple, blue.
Yep. And by the time you get to your third degree black belt, you can give all the way through black belt.
Carte blanche, okay.
Yeah. So then you do have the potential of not ruining the martial art per se, but the perception of the martial art, or watering down the martial art. So that's one threat. But then the other threat is, depending on how you define jiu-jitsu, I think the sport itself can kind of derail it.
Totally agree.
Meaning, well, if you look at like judo, my daughter just won silver at the U.S. Open in Florida, and she's going to be at the 2024 Olympics. That's her goal. I believe she'll make it. In my opinion, the sport of judo ruined the martial art of judo because of the rule set. And I see the same thing happen in jiu-jitsu, where when I started jiu-jitsu, I didn't even know there was such a thing as a jiu-jitsu tournament, right?
And there weren't many, that's why.
Right. And nowadays, most people think of jiu-jitsu and they immediately start thinking about tournaments that they've seen, like the Worlds or Pan Ams or Abu Dhabi or whatever, Polaris. There's a ton of them now. And every time you define a rule set, you change the game itself. Like, you start to limit the martial art. And jiu-jitsu, for me, I told you this, how I found jiu-jitsu. I came to jiu-jitsu because I wanted to learn how to fight. I didn't want to learn a sport.
Yeah, bounded by rules.
Right. And so when I teach and when I think about jiu-jitsu, I still think about, can he hit me? Can I elbow him in the face from here? You know, I'm thinking about it from a fight perspective. And the other thing is, I mean, I teach takedowns. There's a lot of jiu-jitsu schools that don't even teach takedowns anymore. You know, and it's like, well, how are you ever going to get the fight to the ground if no one ever taught you how to defend strikes or how to close the distance, how to get into the clinch, how to get the fight to the ground? I agree that taking the fight to the ground is the best way to safely end the fight. But every fight, one of our coaches, Chris Conley, is fond. A lot of guys are fond of saying that 90% of fights end up on the ground.
It's a classic statistic. Heard it so many times.
But here's what Chris Conley says. That's true, and I'm going to curse here a little bit in order for it to be...
Because it's a direct quote.
Because it's a direct quote. It's the internet. You can say whatever you want to at any time.
It is a direct quote.
But Chris Conley is fond of saying, every one of those motherfuckers starts standing.
It's true. Yeah.
So, you know, and that's how I see, not like it's not destroying jiu-jitsu, but it's changing it for sure.
Yeah.
It's changing it from, and maybe this is the path that Taekwondo went on. Maybe this is the path that karate went on. Maybe this is the path that judo went on, where all of a sudden, and judo is a bad example because it's still very martial. It's rough. But if you look at traditional martial arts, at some point in their history, maybe that's what happened. Maybe the rule set of Taekwondo that didn't allow you to punch each other in the head anymore and start playing tag with your feet. I mean, I don't know. But that, I think, is probably the biggest risk to jiu-jitsu, is just that it will lose its self-defense fighting aspect.
It'll be more about rules and points than
and it's
applicability.
It's already happened, and I think SBG is way better than your average organization in terms of focusing on and preserving the original aspects of jiu-jitsu. But even within our organization, I remember a camp in Portland a few years ago, maybe 2-3 years ago. It's an individual who's no longer with us, so that's nice. There is a kind of self-selection, and the people in my anecdotes, not on purpose, but also not coincidentally, are gone from the organization now. But another black belt was teaching. A good black belt was teaching half guard bottom, and he put his foot on the hip, and he was talking about a foot lock. You know, essentially, if a person puts his foot on my hip this way, I'm going to break his ankle. And someone who wasn't even taking the class was sitting off on the side, which is already disrespectful. It's like, oh no, that's illegal. and I just interjected. I'm like, illegal where? In heaven? Like, like it in the universe has disallowed. It's like, and I always say to my students, and I said to him, I'm like, if I can break your foot, it's jiu-jitsu. You're saying this may or may not be allowed in an IBJJF tournament.
Yeah.
He's not. He's talking about jiu-jitsu, and SBG teaches jiu-jitsu. It doesn't teach IBJJF legal jiu-jitsu. And this other black belt was like, you put your foot here, I'm going to break it. And it's like, that is true in the universe. What the other guy said is not true anywhere except in his mind and for the 5 minutes out of your life that you're fighting for one certain organization. But it even made its way into some of our athletes and teachers. People get it backwards, right?
Isn't it going to be a test event in the Olympics coming up as well?
Asian Games, and it is.
So it's trending towards getting that competition at a higher level, which will have it's a relatively structured rule set for that level of competition, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I think I'm kind of stealing something I think I've seen John post in the past on social media, but I tend to agree. I don't want to see jiu-jitsu in the Olympics.
It'll ruin it.
Because of the...
It'll ruin it.
It'll do what it did to judo. I mean...
And taekwondo.
And let's be honest. I mean, the Olympics, I mean, we don't really want that. Now we're boxing. Like, we're associated with the organization that's so corrupt. And
no way, you get a medal. It has a ribbon.
That would be cool. You know, if his daughter won a gold medal in jiu-jitsu, that'd be cool. But I don't think it'd be good for the martial art.
Yeah, in grander scheme, it would change people's perspective of what they're using it for. That's interesting.
Well, and they're going to change they're going to change the rules to suit them, right? Because in judo, it was basically just takedowns with a gi on. That's what judo was in the Olympics originally. Like, it was just straight takedowns with a gi on. But then the Russians started killing the Japanese with all their leg attacks. And so then it was like, okay, you can't touch the legs anymore. Like, what's the rationale? Or I think it was the last Olympics, the Israeli girl was choking everybody with her gi. And so now
the apron part of the gi.
Yeah.
Is that considered dirty pool?
No, it wasn't
it's
before then.
It's super legit. But they didn't like the results. Plus, they want to see throws. They don't want to see submissions. So guess what? It's no longer safe to choke somebody with your gi, but you can still choke them with their gi.
Yeah. So, but I mean, the key point is what you just said. They want to see throws. They want to see these. So, in other words, the focus comes off of efficacy in a fight and goes to spectator friendliness. And the
same
thing
happened in the UFC, right?
Yeah, and exactly. But the thing about original Gracie family kind of pushed Vale Tudo back in Brazil. There were 2-hour and 45-minute fights, no rounds, no standing up, just like people watching, and it's like, it's not over until someone just gives up or goes to sleep. That's the only way to end this fight. And the Brazilians were down with that, but the Japanese in pride were more used to pro wrestling, which is very visual and big. It's not big. I mean, Helio Gracie might be on the bottom for 2 hours. He didn't care. It's like, I will choke you, or you might fall asleep because it turns to midnight, but I'm going to win and I will not quit. I mean, that was his mindset. Like, we'll go till like 6 a.m. And I will you can't stop me and I will stop you. It might take 2 days. And the Brazilians like, who's going to win? And the Japanese martial arts and the American martial arts are used to pro wrestling and these things that are very, off the top rope, body slam, which just doesn't happen in a real fight.
Are you saying pro wrestling is not real?
I don't believe he said that.
Damn it.
But and so it just keeps going. Judo is obviously not pro wrestling, but it's like, what do uneducated spectators find exciting versus what wins fights?
So if it can stay true, and there's no degradation, because I think it probably will end up in the Olympics, but pull that out of it. If BJJ stayed true, 10 years from now, what do you think it looks like? I mean, does it look different than it did 10 years ago?
Way.
Okay.
But a bifurcation has already started. So this move towards sport will continue, and all sports will play to the rules. So whatever the IBJJF or Abu Dhabi does, people will become specialists, and they'll find ways to win in that rule set. But they're creating a niche market for the original Gracie family members and Henry Akins and SBG and the people who are still teaching jiu-jitsu as a fighting art. So they're not hurting us. Although they'll get more popularity, they also alienate anyone who's not a competitive athlete, who really wants to, I'm going to do this. I'm going to quit my job. I'm going to spend all my own money to fly to LA and, spend $5,000 to make nothing and compete. I mean, that's already a small group.
Farther down, I mean, like, you're not going to go in your first week and go compete anyway, right? You got to invest some time.
But schools push it, and schools require it. Some schools require it to get your next belt, or just the vibe of the school. The instructor is a competitor, and all the people you look up to are competitors, and so you want to be a competitor.
It's a gravitational pull, yeah.
Yeah, but I think they create more demand for real jiu-jitsu than they eliminate. So I think we're okay.
I'd agree with that.
Yeah.
I mean, from a business owner standpoint, I mean, if I look at the market, like I would be looking at teenagers and 26-year-old males. For one thing, that's not the best clientele. But another thing is there's just so many more people who could use it that are in their 40s, 50s, 60s. I mean, we have the average age on the mat on an afternoon cap class at the gym. There'll be 24 people out there, and it's probably 42 is the average age.
Really?
That's those are not people that are there because they want to win a world title. Because guess what? That boat has sailed.
Yeah.
Right?
For sure.
So, I don't worry about it. I just, for me, the nostalgia of it, just the remembering why I got into it and how I got into it, and I won't let that go away. And that's what John's saying, and Henry's not going to let it go away, and
Gracie Academy,
SBG's not going to let it go away. So I mean, there'll always be a place for that real jiu-jitsu, where punches and kicks and takedowns and all of it is involved.
Why would a school stop teaching takedowns? surprised me when you said that there would be some schools out there that stop
It's
that.
half ignorance, like you will get injured and it's too dangerous, and it's half laziness, like, well, you can and many people do win a world championship without ever taking anyone down. You sit on your butt, play from guard. So again, the rules.
They just start and they sit down.
Yeah.
Okay, interesting.
I would say that's more common than not for competitive jiu-jitsu.
Especially at the lower weights.
And even no-gi grappling.
Yeah.
So what is that person saying? I don't even want to play the stand-up game, so I'm just going to sit down.
I want to win,
Yeah.
and I'm not good at takedowns, so I'm not going to learn takedowns. I'm just going to do the minimum amount I can to win.
Again, because they're playing to the rule set. So if you get 2 points for a takedown, but I can pull guard for free.
Yeah, let's
Now
erase that
I've
ability for you to
erased.
get that. Yeah.
I've taken that off the table, and now I'm the only one who can score unless you pass my guard, because I get 2 points if I sweep you now.
So they're totally gaming it. Okay,
Yeah,
that makes more
yeah,
sense
yeah.
to me now.
But watch, add kicks and punches to a grounded opponent, and no one will pull guard anymore, because no one's going to sit down if the other person's allowed to knee or kick you in the face.
Be a controversial approach. For sure. I mean, you're right at tee-off height for a kick.
Right. It's not good.
No, it's a less than ideal starting position.
Huh, that's interesting. What's your hardest client? Somebody comes through the door and you're like, oh, God damn it, this is going to be a challenge.
To sell on the business?
Just
or?
somebody comes in that they're interested, but you're like, okay, is it an age? Is it a particular background where you know that you consistently have had issues?
Okay, I got it. I give you the stereo. This is like
the stereotype. Dude, I saw it on UFC. I'm in. And as an owner, you're like, oh, God.
That's a good one, but the best one is I want to be a professional fighter. I've not trained before, but I've been in a lot of street fights. That's the worst one. And I get that one a lot.
So they last. I mean, that's you got to get the year up
They-
front.
they-
Pay for a year up
They
front.
don't. They never join. So here's the thing. Here's the thing. My goal in life is to be the next UFC world champion. I'm going to be the next world champion. They're saying this, right?
Actually verbalizing
Yes,
while making eye
yes,
contact.
yeah,
I love that level of confidence,
No.
whether or not
Right,
it's deserved.
right, yeah.
But check this out. So then you walk them around the school. You give them a lesson in jiu-jitsu or give them a little kickboxing lesson. And then you sit them down in the office and you say, okay, here's how much it is. And then they go, oh, well, I can't pay that. And I'm like, 20 minutes ago, this was your life's goal. And all I had to do to derail you was say, this dollar amount?
Well, yeah, I mean, you haven't seen my truck or my 5 iPhones, and like, yeah.
But it's like, it wouldn't matter what the dollar amount is. Like, if it was truly your passion, like I could say it's going to be $500,000, and you'd be like, all right, I'll figure out a way to make it
can I
work.
make payments? You know,
Yeah.
you'd find a way to
You'd
break
figure it
that
out. If it truly
Yeah.
was your goal in life, money would never be an obstacle. Like I tell people that. I'm like, there should be nothing in your life that you don't do because money was the barrier between you doing it or not doing it.
Yeah.
That's a cop-out.
Yeah.
Like you can always make more money. Like figure it out. Hustle. Like
Yeah.
figure it. If it's that important to you, you will make it work.
It's funny how money becomes an obstacle instead of what it's supposed to be, at least in my mind, is a small tool for empowerment.
Right.
Like, hey, we're able to do this because of the money, not I can't do that because fill in the blank dollar amount.
Yeah, well, I tried to kind of roughly translate in my head what $160 a month would be today. $160 a month 25 years ago would be today. I'm sure there's a website.
It's a lot, I'm sure.
But let's say it's double even.
Oh, it's definitely more. I'd say 4 or 5
Okay.
X probably. Yeah.
Right. Okay. But that's only half of the equation because I also, in other words, 160, 320. Let's say it's 640. It's 640, but $640 to me today, as a middle-aged, tenured professor, is a lot less money than $160 was to me
Yeah.
as an unemployed graduate student. You know, it's more like $1,200 in terms of what I can do comfortably. It's more like $1,200, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to learn jiu-jitsu. Yeah.
Last question. One tool. You only get one tool only. If you had to pick a move, even though I know some people consider jiu-jitsu to be infinite, but you only get you're screwed. You could only pick one. What is it?
Rear naked choke.
Damn, that was fast.
He jumped on that because he knew it was going to be. That's where I was going.
Well, no, because we both do real jiu-jitsu.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what would your second be then? Since John already said rear naked choke in an instant. second thing that you would just default to?
Guillotine.
Yeah, absolutely. In other words, front naked choke.
Yeah, so front and rear.
I'd rather be behind you and blindside you, but if not, I'll finish you from the front. But it's choke, because I joked, but I wasn't joking. Whether it's PCP, steroids, tequila, whatever, I've seen guys in jiu-jitsu tournaments have their arm go from here to here, and then they keep fighting with this arm, and then the guy breaks their other arm like this, and then it's a Monty Python movie. I mean, you can't. They're not feeling it. The next day they're in trouble, but they will keep.
Week or month
Yeah, but
they're in
I
trouble,
mean,
yeah.
they'll keep coming, but it's like this. That's like, click, lights are out.
Is there not a ref in that particular situation
there
you
is,
just
but
described?
That's another. So now you have more homework to do, because now you have to go watch the Hodger Gracie Jacare fight at Worlds, when Hodger breaks Jacare's arm and he tucks it in his belt
And keeps fighting.
finishes the match.
Yeah, and it happened 20 years before that. Jean-Jacques Machado was one of the best ever, and this guy Valigi Ismail, who is also one of the best ever, he choked Hoist Gracie unconscious. Jean-Jacques got both his arms at brown belt, and he just kept fighting. He was a legendary psychopath.
Yeah, I'm going to put you in that category. If you can stuff both your arms in and just keep going. My
Headbutting.
Lord.
So I'm gonna tag on to what Frankl saying, because this was I can't remember if this was John Kavanaugh or Matt Thornton, or maybe they stole it from somebody else. It doesn't matter, but I think it's a perfect way to think about jiu-jitsu. Jiu-jitsu shouldn't hurt you; it should kill you.
Yeah, I mean,
That's the best ending right there, just so you know.
I'm done then.
No, both of you guys, thank you for your time. Thanks for the time this weekend.
Absolutely,
Thank
my
you
pleasure.
for being super welcoming. It's been an interesting journey. I found it late. I'll be dead of old age in like 2 or 3 years, I'm pretty sure. If my hobbies don't kill me, it's just going to be a race between the two. But I love it. I mean, the first day I left, I came back, and Jamie was like, how was it? I'm like covered in sweat. I was like, it was awesome. She said, what happened? I'm like, I got my ass kicked. Everything I did was wrong, and I just lost. She's like, who are you fighting? Some big guy? I'm like, no, her name's Leah. But she just beat the shit out of me. She didn't beat the shit out of me at all.
Yeah.
But it was like, try to roll to your side. That doesn't work. I couldn't do anything. And to me, I was like, this is exactly what I love. And the fact that it seems, in talking to both of you and everybody who's deep into it, that the journey, Jocko described it as being infinite, but I'm like, I don't know if that's possible, because, but the journey might be infinite. The actual physical moves and the lever arms, I think you might tap out at some point, but the way you think about it and the mental journey, and that's, I mean, again, super new to it, but that's what I love about it, is the thinking person's game. Because it seems like the people who are really good at it, I forget where I heard the term, but it was nerd assassin, and it is the best term I've ever heard.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, he might work at IBM, but for the love of God, do not let him get his hands on you, because you're done.
Yeah.
Which is perfect. It's the litmus test right there. Like, Trump's all strength, the lever, the technique. So thank both of you. It's been awesome.
It was our pleasure.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
That's it, ladies and gentlemen. That's all you get for the week. Next week, I'm going to actually devote to a Q&A. It's been a couple months since I've done one, and the questions have slowly been trickling in those 2 months. So I'll put out a social media post here shortly and get everybody percolating on some questions. So next week's podcast will be dedicated to Q&A. Hopefully it's not all military stuff. I have a suspicion that it might be heavily military, but we'll see how it goes. And what else? That's it. I talked about Free Range American at the beginning. Thank you to everybody who supports the podcast, whether it's buying the merchandise. Free Range America, the same thing. Thank you to everybody who is supporting it by buying the product, not only for themselves. I know people who've reached out and they want to buy it as gifts. And then the coolest thing about it is them posting it on social media. I need to do a little bit better job of reposting that stuff. I've just been off the grid for about the last 10 days, hiking my ass off in the middle of nowhere, Alberta, which was beautiful. And I'm glad that I went, but a little bit derelict in some of my duties. So I'm going to get on that. And I think that's about it. See you guys next week.